Here they come. Can you see my screen as I'm letting people in?
We see the slideshow.
Okay, great.
Welcome, everybody. Everybody's looking like they're on time. Thank you so much. And we're going to just give it 1 minute for a few folks to filter in, and we'll start up here. I'm seeing 12 participants right now, so maybe we'll just give it 1 more minute here. There's Abby. Welcome, Abby. Okay, well, maybe for the sake of time and just getting, and I assume we'll have a few folks filter in, just as a point of order, I think everybody here knows, but we will just have this be the task force members and staff that are on the actual Zoom meeting. And we've just kind of, with the help of Vivian on our team who's on the call, thank you so much, Vivian, are going to be streaming this to YouTube for anybody else that wants to listen in so that we can kind of maintain the public process, but also have a bit of privacy. I want to thank everybody for joining today. It looks like we'll probably have a few folks that are trickling in later, but thanks so much for your time. Thanks for making this meeting happen. I know that we're all very busy and there's a lot of things going on, and I'm really happy that we're being intentional to take out time to talk about this important issue. I've kind of said it a lot, and as we've talked with roundtables and others across the state and floated this idea of, you know, why are we having this dialogue? It's just so clear to me and critical in a year like this, especially with the things we're facing with drought and fire and mudslides and floods, that, you know, we're all connected. And our state, even if, you know, there's a divide with the mountains or a precipitation divide this year, you know, what impacts, you know, one group of us impacts all of us. And seeing that we're interconnected, and that if we work together and collaborate, that we can be stronger and make smarter decisions that really benefit everyone is a key goal and a key lesson I think that we're living through in this time. So it's really nice to get to be intentional again and have this dialogue. So I wanted to maybe give you a little bit of the overview for the day, and you've seen the agenda, but I think we put this on a slide too. Kat, if you can click to the next slide. Thank you. But we'll walk, and I'm going to hand things over to Gigi and Joy, our great facilitators, to kind of take the reins here for a little bit. But we'll just, as a high level, we're going to do a little bit of overview of kind of where we've been. I'm going to turn things over then to Kelly Romero-Heaney to say a few words. We thought it would be important to just maybe level set, and I know that we talked to each of you one-on-one about the water plan, maybe just a little bit of historical context, but we wanted to kind of give some insight in where we're headed and kind of help remind this group and anyone listening of how this information will fold into the water plan update. And then we are going to revisit the themes that we talked about at our last meeting. So basically kind of a little bit of a deeper dive in meeting one and talk about if those themes are the right themes or if the task force has been thinking of new ideas. And then we are going to kind of pause to see if there's anything to expand on that discussion, then talk a little bit about the September 30th conference and public workshop. And I'll talk a little bit more about the thoughts, but just really realizing that that's probably needs to be a day-long event and have a bit more of a conference feel, but then also have this kind of afternoon workshop piece. So we want to talk about that, get your thoughts on helping us shape that workshop component a little bit. And then that's it. So we're going to try to be efficient with our time today. And in the spirit of that, I will turn things over to Gigi to get us started.
Thank you so much, Russ. And again, good morning to all of you. It's nice to see you and meet with you again. As Russ had echoed, thank you so much for taking the time today. So some of the things that we're going to talk about, we want to make sure, as Russ had said, that we go through and we review and we clarify those themes, that came out of the individual interviews and individual conversations that we had, and April, May timeframe. So we want to kind of look at that again, review that, and ask for your input regarding what we've come up with and what we've discussed. So we're going to take some of the information from the last workshop, of course, building on that with this workshop. And we just want to make sure that we've got all the right pieces together and that we have captured your input appropriately. We also want to talk about any additional themes, that you might have had some time to think about or that might have emerged. Many of you are very active in your communities and having additional conversations. So we want to make sure that as you are continuing to do the amazing work that you're doing in your communities, and as things come up, we want to give another opportunity to add those items, add that input, because again, as you serving as a task force, you really are sort of the arm, if you will, to those communities and to some of those special partnerships that you have. So we want to make sure that we take some additional time in this workshop to go through that. And then one of the other things that we want to be able to do and remind you of is making sure that you visit Engage CWCB for any questions that might come up. And this is that additional input not only for you, but certainly for the public who might be streaming. So make sure that you are using that as another input resource for this process and for this effort. And so with that, next slide, please, Kat. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over.
Before we do that, I wanted to remind you all about the group agreements that we came up with last time. And so our conversation included the fact that when we're having dialogue about difficult issues or issues that could sometimes be contentious, especially when we're having dialogue with people who have very different perspectives, it's helpful to have some agreements for how we're going to have these discussions together. And so last time we were together, I proposed some group agreements, and then you added some. And so I'm going to paste those into the chat box here. And I just want to review them and get agreement on these again before we move forward. And so I'm pasting them all at once, but I'll read them one at a time. So the agreements that I proposed and then you all added last time were about listen to try to understand other perspectives, the acknowledgement that we're here to explore rather than to debate or argue, give everyone an opportunity to participate, be respectful of time limits, and we don't really have those in the same way we did last time, but we do still want to make sure that everybody gets time to be able to talk. Be yourself and be engaged. You are here because of the unique perspective and experience that you have, and so we really want to hear what you have to say. Be respectful of the needs of others. Disagree without being disagreeable. We may have different viewpoints, but we can still sort of remember each other's humanity and regard each other with respect as we have conversation, and show up authentically. So my questions for you are, is there anything on here that you need clarification about? Is there anything that you would like to add? I'm looking at your faces and seeing nothing right now, but please raise your hands or feel free to propose something in the chat box. Unless I see something else come up. Oh, Rio, did you have something? No. I will ask, is there anybody who can't agree to work with this list of agreements as we move forward today? Okay, you all. Thank you for that.
Thanks so much, Joy and Gigi. I will just say we are incredibly lucky to have Kelly Romero-Heaney join our team, and I wanted to invite her here today because, as you know, she was formerly a member of the task force. And I think, with today's meetings kind of making that transition formal from moving off of this task force. So I wanted to let her say a few words because I know she's very passionate on this topic and will carry that passion forward to her work with DNR and with us now.
Thank you so much, Russ. And also, Russ, I just have to thank you for your leadership on this. It's such an important topic, a very timely topic. I think there are so many big water issues that Colorado is facing and will continue to face with climate change and population growth that we cannot afford to not provide equitable access to the water decision-making table. And so what a great job pulling together this brain trust so that we can make sure that whether it's our basin roundtables, our boards, or whatever level of decision-making body it is, that those bodies reflect the communities that they represent, and that we have a very healthy pipeline of new professionals kind of learning the field and then moving into leadership roles. So thank you, Russ. This is so important. As Russ mentioned, I just took a new position with the state, so I'm now the Assistant Director for Water for Colorado's Department of Natural Resources. And as such, now that I'm playing this role, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to serve directly on the Water Equity Task Force, but certainly doesn't mean that I'm actually very bummed to not be serving in the capacity that I was. However, I'll still be able to play a role in its success and kind of moving forward any recommendations or ideas that come out of it. And I also just want to reiterate that I continue to be a believer in the Basin Roundtable experiment. I know some folks that are part of that Water Equity Task Force haven't been involved in the Basin Roundtables, but I truly think their intent was to enhance participation and really increase equity in terms of access to the water conversation. I will say, without the roundtable process, I wouldn't be here today. It helped to get me to the table, give me a voice at a time when, I'll admit, there maybe weren't a lot of women working in water. Obviously, there are now, looking at the list of, oh, sorry, my dog wants to be heard all of a sudden. He wants a voice. Anyway, point being, I am a believer, but I do think that we need to work maybe even just on a social level to make sure that our roundtables are reflecting their communities, the perspectives, the diversity of culture, professions, etc. So whatever this task force can do to help ensure that going forward, I think that's great. So with that, go forth, work together, appreciate this collaborative approach, and just please know that I'm here to support you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you. And yes, congratulations on your new role. We're happy to have you aboard. And we will definitely be coordinating with Dan Gibbs and the governor to find a replacement for Kelly on the task force. As Kelly said, and too kind, thank you so much. But I mean, really, I can't imagine having done this effort without the help of Gigi and Joy. They're just amazing people in their own right, as well as facilitators. And so I thank them. And then my team, our staff, including Kat, Sam, who's not here today, but has been behind the scenes helping, and now our new hire, Elizabeth Scoder, who is going to be really focused on outreach and equity issues on our team. And it's nice to have some kind of deliberative time set aside in somebody's schedule to kind of look at these issues. So your input, will definitely be something that we carry forward, not only in the water plan, but things that I know Elizabeth and our team are listening to and looking for opportunities to act upon. So, and then last but not least, all of you, I just am so grateful and lucky to work with you every day. So I think what we would like to do is maybe talk a little bit about kind of just next steps. So we'll do a little bit more presentation, and then I'm probably really eager to make the time to listen to you more and talk a little bit less. So let's move on to the next section here and then open it up to conversation in a little bit.
Thanks, Russ. Kat Weissmiller, CWCB staff, and I'm really excited to be here today. we just thought it would be useful for this group to kind of contextualize some elements of the water planning process and talk about the water plan update and where we are in the process. And I know many of you kind of heard some elements of this with us during our one-on-one meetings, but this will be a little bit of a reminder of the water plan update process and where we are and how things have progressed to date. So with that, I'll just jump right in. So as many of you know, the water planning process in Colorado is iterative. The first water plan came out in 2015, but since that time, we've been working on the update, starting in 2019 with the analysis and technical update, which came out in 2019 and was the underpinning data for building our water plan update. And then following that, we rolled right into the basin implementation plan updates. And those have been underway for most of the last year and will be concluding towards the end of this year and be finalized in January of 2022. That's our local planning efforts in each basin to really think about strategies and projects and priorities. And then we are now in the process of doing the water plan update, so the actual update to the plan. And that kind of kicked off last year and will go through the end of 2022. So just wanted to kind of give you that background. This is this process went relatively quickly over going forward. I think it'll be about roughly an 8-year process to go through this whole 3-step update to get the water plan updated. So just wanted to remind you all of that piece. And then,
can I interject something, Kat, real quick?
Oh, sure.
I'm so sorry. I was just going to say that, you know, that process to do even the technical update started as basically as soon as the water plan launched. So while we talk a lot and have done a lot of presentations about the work going in recently to the water plan, as Kat said, it's really the pieces of this whole, and the technical update even started with a stakeholder effort that were these technical advisory groups that really fed into that. So it's the whole entirety of kind of consistent iterative stakeholder engagement that really builds this. And so, you know, one of the things that I think Joy and Gigi have really been smart about challenging us on is, you know, has there been enough engagement? And, you know, I think we're always questioning that. We've gotten some feedback from stakeholders that, you know, maybe there are ways that we can increasingly be more intentional about that or be more strategic in how we're doing that in ways that open up opportunities for any number of peoples. But I think it's important to note that our process has always been, whether it's the roundtables or a broader group, to bring people in at each of these stages, and they really build upon each other. So certainly not operating in a vacuum on any of this.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. That's a great point, and I'm glad you pointed out that, yeah, the stakeholder outreach goes all the way back to the tech update. So I just want to quickly talk about the phases of this water plan update. The first being the scoping phase. As Russ mentioned, we're trying to make this feedback and input process happen from day one. We often say that the original water plan received 30,000 comments. So this time around, when we're doing the update, we've taken this intentional step of adding a scoping phase in the kickoff of the update to really try to get input and identify people's hopes, our stakeholders' hopes for what this water plan update will look like early, to hopefully kind of prevent ourselves from getting 30,000 comments at the end. So our scoping phase kicked off in October of 2020, and it extended through the end of last month, June of 2021. And this is the first phase of the water plan update. We're now moving into drafting, and then we'll be finalizing the update. And obviously, I want to point out that the work of the task force also kicked off in this time frame, but we're aware that this task force is going to need a little bit more runtime than what our scoping phase really, than the discrete timing of our scoping phase. So we're definitely considering that the task force's input will be considered and extended beyond the scoping phase, the discrete October to June, and we'll continue to hear from the task force. We'll continue to hear from people that you bring to us to share their thoughts going forward. And this is kind of just the beginning of a hopefully much broader conversation around equity in the water planning process as we move forward. But to recap the scoping process that that was just concluded from October 2020 to June of 2021, we had 2 Riverside Chat events. So those were virtual events that included CWCB staff.
Did cat freeze for you, Gigi?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe just while she's going out, can kind of fill in.
I'll touch on.
Oh, she's back. Sorry, you froze up there for a second, Kat.
Oh, sorry about that. Now I'm getting the message that my internet's unstable. So hopefully I will stick with you guys. Okay, so I'm not sure where I cut out, but I was just mentioning that there were 2 Riverside Chat events, one in January and one in June. And then in between those 2 Riverside Chat events, we held 13 workshops on specific topics of interest to the water plan. And while we didn't cover every topic with a workshop, we heard a ton of feedback between our workshops, our regular ongoing like task force meetings, not just the equity task force, but drought task forces and other groups, and ad hoc meetings with stakeholders during that time frame. We partnered with over 20 organizations and agencies in pulling together workshops and pulling together some of our outreach efforts. And in total, we had about 27 hours of workshops with 50 staff and guest speakers at those. And altogether, we had about 1,200 attendees. So we're pretty excited about the level of input and the level of feedback we got during the scoping process. And we hope that it will, that it's producing some themes and some ideas for the water plan that we can all get behind. So I want to just rehash for you the water plan vision that we talked about with most of you in your one-on-ones a little bit, but I want to kind of just touch on the key principles that came out of the Riverside Chat that we held in January. The first being that our water plan update action vision is to have it be really action focused. So the original water plan was organized around 9 objectives with goals that were set out to varying deadlines ranging to 2050. But this update will keep the same values as the original plan and reorient them into 4 action areas that you can see in the bullets below that roughly align with cities, farms, streams, and planning. And then within these action areas, the plan is going to identify near-term steps in roughly the next 8 years aimed at managing risks. So these actions will collectively capture the spirit of the original water plan objectives while offering some clear and actionable steps to manage Colorado's water wisely for the future. And this focus on actions was extremely popular. We got a lot of good feedback around it in scoping. So we're excited that there's some support for this. The second point is that we want the update to be increasingly accessible. The original water plan was over 500 pages, but we hope to streamline the update a bit to have a 2-volume format, which would be similar to what we did in the technical update and also in the updates to the basin implementation plans. So basically the goal is to retain some of the legacy content from the original plan, but transfer it into a shorter and more action-focused document that's easy to understand, that's written in plain language, and will be easy to use. We hope to make these increasingly accessible online and have that online format be sort of the primary entry point into the documents. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Volume 1 and Volume 2 format in a bit. We also heard some feedback around accessibility, things like having translation or like during the scoping process, having meetings at night or at times where more people can attend them. And that's really important for us to hear, and we want to continue to hear those ideas going forward so that we can make our process increasingly accessible, not just the product. So the next kind of core principle is that we want the water plan vision to be line of sight. The original water plan had a lot of terms that could be a little bit confusing. They range from values to objective measures and actions and critical actions. So the vision for the update includes kind of streamlining that, streamlining the report and the language to make it more consistent and easier to see the line of sight between the values of the water plan down to the action areas and then the specific actions recommended to achieve this vision. So, and lastly, organized by action area. And as you can see below, the 4 action areas of the update will be vibrant communities. So that's really around municipal and industrial water use. Thriving watersheds. So that includes both environmental and recreational water uses, as well as forest health. and then robust agriculture, dealing with agricultural water uses, and then resilient planning. And I think resilient planning needs a little bit more unpacking, but that's really where this equity task force and the work that we're doing today and throughout this year fits in. Resilient planning is an action area that kind of encompasses several concepts under the umbrella of planning. And in the water plan update, or the original water plan, these were loosely kind of gathered under the umbrella of planning, but also into the other category, or sprinkled throughout the document without real definition around it. And so resilient planning for the update will cover encouraging resiliency, climate adaptation, and just overall preparedness for an uncertain future through education, policy, innovation, and inclusivity. And during our scoping process, we saw four major emerging themes around resilient planning, and I'm just going to walk you through them really briefly. The first being that resilience and adaptive planning are critical. Being resilient means making strategic decisions and managing our future risks. So it's a way of approaching our future challenges by taking actions to reduce risks, stay flexible and adaptive, and to take advantage of emerging opportunities. As drought cycles get closer together and it's getting warmer and drier in many parts of the state, we're seeing shifts in hydrologies and more extreme weather events. And this makes parts of our state more vulnerable than ever. And I'm sure you guys are seeing that on the ground in different parts of the state today. And so we're really hearing the need to build adaptive capacity, to build resilience to future weather challenges. So that's the first theme. The second theme, and really where this Water Equity Task Force fits in, is around inclusivity, and inclusivity makes Colorado stronger. A priority of the DNR and CWCB as well is doing more to integrate practices that promote equity, diversity, and inclusivity. We always say that the water plan is Colorado, so we really need to be talking to all Coloradans beyond our typical stakeholders. And we want to make sure that we're reaching out to be more inclusive and representative of the diverse people and opinions in the state today as it changes and grows. This is a really important thing that we feel like it's been with us along the road since House Bill 1177. And we're continuing to make strides towards increased inclusivity, but increasingly we see the need to strive for even greater levels from different sectors, cultures, and perspectives in ways that represent Colorado as it grows and changes. This is new. This is not something that we really included in the original water plan. And we're really excited about the work that you guys are going to be doing and already are doing in your communities in many cases to elevate this conversation around inclusivity and equity and diversity. The next theme that I want to touch on is an informed public engages on water challenges. So this is really about education and awareness. So during our scoping efforts, we had an education workshop and we heard from educators in each basin's public education participation and outreach coordinators, along with other stakeholders that are working in the education space in Colorado. And we heard a desire to better support and fund our PEPO liaisons and so that they can collaborate with each other and their local communities as a trusted resource. We also heard, and we've talked about this a little bit in our one-on-ones, about the need for a pipeline of young people from a range of backgrounds to work in water and help us develop innovative and interdisciplinary solutions. So these are things that we want to explore in the update, and we hope that you can help us do that. And then lastly, the last theme is government support for local efforts are key. And this theme was touched on in the original water plan, and it really continues to be important. Communities need supportive governmental policies, whether that's in streamlined permitting or supportive regulatory change to allow water to be used more efficiently. It covers a range of things. It also covers funding, which is a place that the government can offer a lot of support. It's important to remember that the water plan originally showed us the need to fund water projects, and this was a catalyst for the water plan grant program. So we see these as the four key themes that are kind of emerging in the resilient planning action area. And then I just want to touch on quickly some of the elements of the water plan update in terms of how it will look and feel. So I want to talk about line of sight and cross-cutting themes. There are going to be many cross-cutting themes woven throughout the plan. Many are included in what you already heard me talk about. but they'll include some of the original objectives of the water plan, and we increasingly see these being integral to all 4 of the action areas. Climate impacts might be one, equity might be one. So these are a really important piece of the water plan update, not just having a line of sight from our values to our actions, but also integrating these cross-cutting themes that touch on all of our action areas. And then I want to talk quickly about the Volume 1 and Volume 2 format that matches sort of what we've done in the basin implementation plans and the analysis and technical update. So the original water plan will comprise much of what's in Volume 2, including the legacy material and context setting and potentially some minor edits where terminology has shifted or changed. We're looking to make very minor edits on that original water plan, and we kind of refer to that as evergreen material that hopefully we won't have to update a lot going forward. And then Volume 1 is going to be a shorter and more actionable strategy document. It's going to summarize some key contextual changes and updates and cover emerging themes that we've discussed. So we expect that Volume 1 to be about 200 pages in total. And like I said earlier, we'll be working on ways to make this increasingly accessible, potentially even translated. So we're excited about some of those accessibility updates. We have now moved into the drafting phase of the water plan update. We held a workshop in early July, and then we just updated our board last week on where we're going with the water plan update. And we'll be in this phase through, roughly March of 2022 before we start finalizing the water plan. We plan to release a draft to the public in June of 2022. So the path forward with the water plan, there's a number of points on here, but the ones I want to really touch on for you are that we'll be hosting our September 30th Water Equity Task Force public workshop, and we'll be talking a lot today about how that might look. We'll also have a Water Equity Task Force meeting 4 down the road, and hopefully come up with some ideas and principles that we can look to incorporate into the water plan. We'll be also meeting with our board and checking in through 2022 and coordinating with the legislature and other agencies. And like I said, we'll be releasing the draft plan in June of 2022, and then we'll be finalizing that plan by the end of 2022. So that's kind of the path forward on the water plan update, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. But that's all I've got for today.
Thanks, Kat. Does anyone have any questions about process? We just wanted to kind of pause and make sure everybody kind of understood how, how the framing of the water plan update was going to go and where, this equity discussion might fit in. And that may have intentional sections, but also maybe cross-cutting themes, Kat alluded to. Barbara, were you raising your hand? No.
I don't see any other hands or comments, Russ.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay, and just know that as comments and questions do come up, now is certainly the time to bring those up for the task force members. So when we spent some time in May, of course, we kind of centered panels around your feedback, and the feedback that you provided to us in the interviews, we divided into 5 different themes. And when we met and discussed those themes, really spent some time, sharing stories, sharing the insight that each of you have around some of the things that we had heard in those individual conversations, and making sure that as we come together as a task force, that everyone within the task force had a chance to look at what each member had contributed and how we had sort of synthesized that information. And really got some great feedback there from each of you on that. So we had 5 themes when we met in May, and one of the things that we went back and did was we looked at those themes and realized that we really kind of had 6 themes. We actually had a conjunctive theme where we thought, well, this is a really big item, and so we really sort of need to to break that out. So the themes that are still very much what we had talked about, but again, sort of a division, if you will, of what we saw as another item that warranted some discussion and some focus. So what we had was promote diversity and career pathways in water-related career fields through education and engagement, and talked and discussed some items and some concerns and some thoughts around that. Continuing with that, we talked about promoting the importance of collaboration and new voices in water discussions. The third item or theme that emerged was recognizing and addressing elements of the rural-urban divide and expanding grant opportunities to new audiences. So this is sort of where we divided those conjunctive thoughts into two different themes. We also talked about finding ways to engage more community members in discussions about water. And then the sixth theme being encourage and support roundtables to facilitate broad community engagement in creating collaborative solutions. So spent some time with that, but also wanted to go back to the task force to say, did we get it right? Did we capture it appropriately? What were we missing as we were pulling this together? And as you've had some time to really think through the themes that were discussed, what additional thoughts might have come up after that meeting, want to give you a chance right now to really kind of look through or think through, is there anything missing?
And as we begin that, my request would be take a look at these themes, look back at the conversations that you remember us having the last time we all met together, and think about, is there anything about any of these 6 themes that is just not resonating for you? Is there anything that you're not sure about? You don't understand exactly what we mean by something that's written in one of these themes. So let's see if we can be real clear about these 6, and then we can we'll spend some time coming up with any other thoughts you have about other things that can be done to expand the conversation about water in Colorado, expand who is involved in discussions about water. So for now, what questions do you have about these themes? What insights, what thoughts, what concerns? Melly, you took yourself off of mute, so I imagine.
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
One thing that jumps at me as we're talking about this, it's just kind of keeps going around in my head, is like, why is it that different groups don't necessarily participate? And I don't know the answer to that. Maybe there has been research I'm not aware of. It'd be really interesting to find out if there has been. But I think that something, and maybe is just embedded in number 5 there. I don't know that people understand why engage in water conversation is important to them. I mean, people go about their own business and their own lives. And, there's just some connections that people are not seeing. And I can give you a very kind of remote connection, I guess. But we have forest fires, and to fight them, instead of preventing them, we have to fight them. And we use retardants that really have, they have to be manufactured. And those retardant materials are ending up in the South Platte, in Commerce City. There's a lot of connections there that are just not seen. And I'm just wondering if we need to emphasize a little bit more an effort to just explain to people why, and that's just a kind of a very wonky type of example. I mean, there's more obvious ones. But I just wonder if we need to make a big effort out there to really engage people by just making them understand why it should be important to them, how it affects their everyday lives.
I'm hearing 2 things in what you're saying. One is a question about has research been done, and what is that research, maybe who's done it and what have the results been about who is engaging in conversations about water? That's the first part of what I heard. And then the second part is there are ways that water conversations impact people's lives in ways that may not be obvious to them. And what are we doing to sort of paint the picture, tell the story, make it clear what the impacts of that interconnectedness are, right? So it's about helping people understand the ways that these conversations connect and relate to their everyday lives.
Yep, that pretty much captures it.
Okay, I see that a hand is up, but I can't see whose hand. One moment, please. Abby.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for just sharing time this morning. And I'd love to kind of like bounce off of what Melly was saying. And to me, also related to point number 5, and also to Kat's presentation and comments by Russ and kind of where the water plan update is moving, I feel that we have got the technicalness down. I think that that can be such a barrier for people's engagement and wanting to learn more, that technicalness, that wantiness, and how do we translate that into how it comes down to how the water plan and how the Basin Roundtable work and how the Basin Implementation Plans, how this work touches everybody's life within the respective basin, and then also how it's connected statewide. I feel like we have the science, we have that technical capacity, we can speak that, but that is a strong barrier for people who are on the edge looking in. And so I appreciate the steps forward in that consciousness in the update process of providing this in something and how the water plan actually touches people in the state and relates to them directly by having maybe just that translation and having it just kind of in plain speak. I really appreciate Melly bringing that up, and I just wanted to emphasize that I think that is a key component to help expand the field. And then as people potentially become more engaged, there are opportunities for deeper dives into the science, into the technicalities of water management. But how do we really open it up and just remember how water touches every one of our lives every day and how that relates back to our water plan. So thanks, Melly, for teeing that up, and thanks for letting me share my thoughts this morning.
Thank you, Abby. So I have I'll reflect back what I think I heard, and then we've got Sonia, Rio, and Barbara queued up after that. So the addition, Abby, in addition to painting the picture, telling the story about how water relates to everyday life, we have to be careful about how we do it and intentional about how we do it, right? So we can't just speak technical language and expect people to absorb and understand the story. We have to figure out how to tell the story in a way that people can hear, that a broad range of people can hear. Okay, Sonia, and then Rio, and then Barbara.
Thank you. So yeah, I was just going to expand on that by giving an example. Recently, the Colorado Water Conservation Board had their consultant put out a questionnaire to some of the local municipalities, a lot of them in rural areas, looking for input on demand management. Many of those people have not been educated about what demand management even is, how it affects them, what we're thinking. And so a lot of people, I had several of the people who got that questionnaire send it to me and say, we think that this is something you should probably answer. And I had to go back and say, well, no, I think they really want to hear from you. And they said, we don't really understand what's been going on at the state level and how that affects us or impacts us in many ways. And so we're worried about giving input that may not be realistic or relevant or applicable. So I think we can't forget that in trying to engage people, we also have to educate them along the way. You can't just expect people to engage and fill out questionnaires and stuff. We really have to start to educate them and make that connection, as you all have said, between our communities, things happening at a statewide level, our relationship to water, things like that. So I just wanted to point that out as a recent example.
It's a good caution. I was recently telling a story about what it felt like to be in a calculus class at Colorado School of Mines, having come out of a a rural school and having an instructor who did not realize that there might be gaps in what I knew compared to what other students knew, and what it was like to switch schools and have an instructor who taught me from the ground up, not assuming that there were things that I knew. And it was the difference between me feeling like an incompetent learner and me feeling like, like a robust learner, when the assumption wasn't just made. So I'm feeling what you're saying, Sonia, and I think that it's a point well taken. Did somebody unraise their hand?
I didn't mean to.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Great, thanks. Yeah, good to be with everybody, and some thoughts emerging for me in relation to these themes and building on what Abby and Melly and others have said. A couple ideas that for maybe action items that relate to these would be, like I look, when I put on events or host speakers at Adams State through our water education there, I'm like, okay, who are the more diverse speakers that I could invite and have come speak? And maybe there's an idea, something along like a speakers bureau of some sort that have people, they could post on there like their own bio, their topics that they have expertise in, maybe videos of them speaking, their availability, so that I would have me personally, maybe others, a resource of people that we could call upon for those needs as we plan events. And I've just recently been on a conversation about, for example, encouraging women and diverse people to run for office. And also at another meeting where, even though it was a really important meeting to our community, it was all Anglo people on the committee. And I'm like, how can we be more proactive in getting diversity on our committees? And also what's maybe some water leadership development for people that wouldn't normally participate, but we can bring them in and support them, and like kind of what you were just saying, Joy, about help them be robust learners and see themselves as part of that, instead of feeling like there's so much to learn that they don't have time or it's too daunting, which I remember being in that position when I first entered the water conversation here in the Seminoles Valley. So a couple thoughts on how we can be proactive on encouraging more participation.
These are good thoughts. Thank you for them. We'll switch slides, not yet, but here in a moment, and sort of add to these 6 thoughts, add to these 6 ideas. And so let's make sure those things get onto this next list. Rio, Barbara, you're next.
Thanks for holding this meeting and giving us some time to share our thoughts. I just want to build on what others have said and move into this question of what is reasonable to expect the general public to know about water. When I got involved in the roundtable 15 years ago, I was fortunate to take a one-day class from Colorado Water Trust on water law, not having been exposed to that previously. And it appears to me there's a certain amount of, as we just heard, assumption about background knowledge. And if we're reaching out to people about water, whether it's forest health, climate change, impact to aquatic ecosystems and fish dying because the water is so warm, these kinds of things hit the news, but water law, not so much. So if people are going off for their summer vacation to the mountains and wondering why they can't even do catch and release fishing, it would be good for them to understand first in time, first in right, and why there isn't enough water in the stream for them to fish. Just a thought.
So what that makes me think about is like potential strategies about finding ways to bring, and this is sort of expanding the thought of finding ways to bring the reality to people's everyday situations. When I encounter this situation, this is how it relates to this bigger, more complex story. Finding those touch points to be able to explain a difficult to understand concept or set of concepts in people's everyday reality.
Yeah, and when we look at the Colorado Compact and efforts at drought mitigation or voluntary means of reducing demand in our state to satisfy the Colorado Compact, if there are some fairly simple graphics that could be put together so that people can really understand something that's quite legally and structurally complex, I think it would be very helpful to those trying to involve a broader community in water conversation.
I like it. It's a good idea. One of the things that I'm thinking about as we're coming up with these ideas is the job of engaging more voices in water discussions in Colorado is bigger than CWCB, right? Like it's a giant topic. It's a complicated thing to reach out to new audiences. And so I want to continue to encourage you to come up with these ideas, but let's also think about how we might eventually figure out who is doing the work, who are the right people to do the work, and not assume that it will all be done by CWCB. It'll probably be, a collection of people doing things in various kinds of partnerships in various kinds of ways. And so let's just keep the ideas coming and realize that we're going to have to talk about how to share the work as well. Victoria, you have your hand up. Sorry, Barbara, I'll let you respond to that first.
Yeah, if you would allow me, just one of the elephants in the room that we haven't talked about is the movement about the right to water, particularly for disadvantaged communities. And that is at cross purpose with our current legal structure on water. It seems to me that avoiding talking about it is not helpful. I think it would be good to engage it and explain where we are in our legal structure, but to recognize that human right for water.
Thank you, Barbara. Victoria.
Sorry about that. Yes. And then I want to piggyback off what you're saying about thinking about these communities and who are reaching out in these communities, but also paying them. Because usually these people are doing work that is free already. Or when we're talking about historically underrepresented communities and reaching out to the ones that are already doing this work, we always have to think of being equitably paid and not just another item on their shoulders, and also making sure this work is with language justice involved, making sure that this is available for all Coloradoans, and making sure that this is not just able for people to be understood in a different language. Yes, in different languages, but also who's reading it, how does that look? And that looks different in every community. And we need to be active in those communities to be aware of how we support them.
Thank you, Victoria. It's a point well taken. And one of the things that I'm recognizing is that part of what we're doing, part of what I'm hearing in our conversation is about barriers to implementing some of these themes, some of these ideas that are showing up as themes. We can talk about them and they feel like great ideas and things that resonate with a lot of folks, but in terms of how those get rolled out, there are a lot of things to think about, right? Like language in terms of simplicity of language, accessible, non-technical language in terms of who speaks what languages. There are things I was thinking about what what Kelly shared at the beginning of the meeting about her experience with roundtables, and looking at number 6 and thinking about the encouraging and supporting roundtables to facilitate broad community engagement. what kinds of, this is something we'll have to continue talking about, and maybe can talk more about at the September meeting that Russ will say a little bit more about. But what made Kelly's experience as wonderful as it was? What were the factors that were present? And for those who don't have that same kind of experience or haven't had that same kind of experience engaging with their roundtables, what factors would need to be present for them to have an experience like Kelly's, right? So part of what we will need to continue to do is look at themes like these and anything else that you add and understand what is in here. What is it that we need to do? What is it that we need to consider? What kinds of obstacles do we have to overcome?
Yeah, and Joy, and one of the other things, and I was going to go there exactly, you know, as we talk about the barriers to having these conversations and inviting folks in. One of the other things that was mentioned were those financial incentives, or whatever those incentives might be, as one of the other things, not just the language. You know, certainly having an opportunity to be able to access you know, various conversations around water, but, you know, what are some of the incentives that may be provided or considered as a part of bringing people out to kind of hear what's going on?
And more broadly, what do people need in order to be able to engage? And so incentives could be part of it. Translation and interpretation could be part of it. And there are probably things that we're not talking about yet.
Hand clap from Victoria.
So some of you who we haven't heard from yet, especially, okay, there, I see more hands now. Sonia, I'll come back to you. I'm going to go to Kathy.
Hi, good morning. I apologize that I was late. I had trouble logging on this morning. As some of you know or don't know, I represent the Southern Ute Indian tribe. And, you know, when we talk about these themes, and it's been mentioned several times this morning already, inequity, we talk about inequity when we're talking about trying to engage the population in water discussions. And we think about the Indian tribes, that we still have people on the tribal lands who don't even receive water, who don't even have access to potable water. And it's just something that I'm not sure, it seems like that should be the very baseline of any conversations that we have is, and I've heard it mentioned already by a previous speaker, you know, is that the right to water is the baseline foundation. And we should be talking from a point of everyone having access to water. And right now that's not possible. But I just want everyone to remember that, you know, while we're talking about trying to engage people in discussions about water, that we have people who don't even have running water and have to haul water. So it's just something that I'm not really sure. I'm not looking for an answer, but it's just something that I want to make sure that is still on the burner and is an issue. Thank you.
Kathy, thank you for reiterating that. And it hits me hard to hear that reminder. And it, you know, we keep talking about part of what we have an opportunity to do in these conversations is help to understand each other's stories, to help to understand the different experiences that different communities have had with water in Colorado. And this is one of those very basic, it's not story and not history, like one of these basic realities that it's important to make sure that everybody understands as a starting place. Like, we are not all in the same place in water conversations. We don't all even have access to water.
Thank you.
Just in terms of giving folks who haven't yet spoken a chance to say something before I take the next hand, anybody else who hasn't said anything yet?
I don't see anyone else, Joy, except for Sonia, of course.
All right, Sonia, it's back to you.
Yeah, just following up, and I really appreciate what was said about just recognizing and understanding that there are some people who don't even have access to clean water. That's really important. Living in a rural community, I guess, and the role of the roundtables, I think, just to reiterate again, I think there's a lot we can do to prop up the funding within the PEPO committees, within the roundtables, in areas of the Gunnison Basin, in rural communities. Some of these schools are struggling with access to funding to help bus some of these kids out, for instance, to the Eureka Science Center in Grand Junction, to help students and kids understand more about where their water even comes from. And so just wanted to hit on that, but I recognize we have to probably move on. Thank you.
It's a good idea to add to our list. If any of you who have your video off are at all willing, I would love to be able to see your faces as we have this discussion. So if you are willing and able, please join. If not, I understand. Hi, Deb, good to see you. So not to put you on the spot, but the Republican River story is one of those that I think is so unique in the state, and the stakes are so high in terms of what our changing situation means to people in your area. Is there anything that you're thinking about, Deb, from where you sit, that we ought to be thinking about collectively?
Thank you, Joy, for giving me this opportunity. And I've been listening very closely to all of the different comments. It's heartbreaking to know that anyone in our state does not have access to pure drinking water. So that's very heart-rending. I'm the district manager of the Republican River Water Conservation District, and the RRWCD is in the part of the state that when you see the maps that show snow melt and where we're at with our percentages for the year, my area is that gap that has no color in it. That's where we live. We're in Northeast Colorado, farming communities, ranching communities. Highly, our economic engine is irrigation water, and we're held by a compact that was assigned by the 3 states back in 1942. In 1935, there was a devastating flood, a massive flood that came through this area, and 110 souls were lost in that flood, and 4 of them were my family members. My great-grandmother, Frances, whom I'm named after, and my great-grandfather, my great-aunt, Myrna, and my great-uncle Bud, all perished in that flood. And so, as time goes and things change and technology comes in and we're able to do things more efficiently, we still have to be held by this compact that was signed back in 1942. Well, they only knew the water that they could see. And now we see how much our area has benefited from groundwater and technology. But the problem is we have this compact we have to answer to. If we try to shut down depletions in our aquifer too much, that will have a huge impact on our local economies. And yet we all know that we have to conserve, and at the same time we have to meet this compact. I do sit on the South Platte Basin Roundtable. I'm extremely grateful for that opportunity. I just wish that more people from my area would get more educated, be more enthused about participating. But for me, it's a 3.5-hour drive to a meeting that starts at 4 o'clock and ends a lot of times at 8 o'clock. I have to drive all the way home and be back to work in the morning. So that's tough. They are gracious enough to have meetings once in a while in our area, but I completely understand and completely agree that we have got to get more people educated and more people involved in decisions about water. And it matters not what size or where they're from or or ethnicity. It matters that we all get engaged. And because as we talk about it, it's our lifeblood. No matter where you live, you have to have water. So thank you for this opportunity, Joy.
You're welcome, Deb. So one of the things that that reminds me of is just when we talk about access to conversations, we need to think about things like timing and the rural nature of certain people, the distance between people and their roundtables. We need to talk about times of day that people are available who have jobs that are not water related. There are a lot of different aspects of conversations related to equity. The other thing that Deb's story reminds me is that when we talk about equity and diversity means a whole lot of different things, right? It's not just about our social identities. It also has to do with our relationship to our stories and our relationship to water historically. Like Republican River is, there's just nothing else like that situation in Colorado. We'll move on to collecting any new ideas here momentarily. I'm still looking at other faces. I think you'll probably be afraid to take yourselves off of, or to put your video on, because maybe I'll call on you now. But I do want to make sure that we're hearing from the folks who took the time to be here.
This is Lynette Tell. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know how to raise my hand, so I was unmuting.
This works.
Good deal. So I just wanted to echo the access to attend these meetings. Certainly in our area, we don't have a lot of internet for everybody. Certainly the timing is crucial, the timing of meetings. In the middle of the day, everybody right now is trying to hay and put up the little bit of grass hay that we have up here. So stopping in the middle of the day or, during the 9 to 5, 8 to 5 time frame just isn't possible. Certainly trying to have these meetings in the evening, have access to, someone in town that's turning on the internet so that people can virtually attend these meetings, because just like it's been stated before, to drive a couple hours for these meetings is very difficult. And so trying to have access is very important for our area.
Lynette, we haven't met yet. Which area of the state are you in?
Up in Jackson County, the North Platte Round Basin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? What are you all thinking? Okay, so I heard a voice.
Oh, it's Gigi. I was just going to say I don't see any other hands going up or anyone else coming off mute.
Let's quickly switch over to the next slide, which I think is blank and is meant to just be a place for us to add ideas about what are some of those other things that can be done to diversify conversation around water in Colorado. In addition to those 6 themes and some of the things that we've been kicking back and forth, is there anything else that comes to mind that we ought to be considering collectively? Okay, we don't have to belabor it for now. There is something in the chat box. Rio says, a suggestion to think about the accessibility of the fall workshop to people who can't make long drives, have weekday jobs, etc. Yeah, so we do need to talk about what are the different ways that we can provide for people to be able to add their voices to that conversation, even if they can't come to that meeting. Barbara.
Yes, in the equity discussion, we're clearly focused on, and importantly focused on trying to increase the number of humans that are speaking to water issues and helping shape our water plan. The question is, who speaks for all the other critters that depend on our ecosystem. And we do have people on this equity task force that are focused on environmental issues. But I just wanted to raise a suggestion that we have in place what has been viewed as a very functional bottoms-up grassroots roundtable up to CWCB structure for delivering proposed projects for funding. One of the things I think would be an important addition to the role the CWCB staff and board play in looking at those projects before giving them approval for funding would be to climate proof them. We know we're dealing with significant aridification, otherwise we wouldn't be dealing with drought mitigation plans. It seems to me CWCB could set some reasonable floor for diversion structures that are clearly as fish friendly and ecosystem friendly as possible, while still delivering the water in a reliable and efficient way to those who have the water right. So it's just a suggestion to add to our conversation. What can we do in the way we do our business around water in the state to ensure that we have some kind of focus on climate proofing our water systems?
Anybody from CWCB staff want to respond to that comment before I move on?
Joe, this is Russ. As always, I really appreciate Barbara's perspective and think it's a great point. So all of these ideas that are being brought up are amazing thoughts, and I'm really excited to kind of record these and see how we can fold these in. I don't know right now if these are emerging as bigger themes, and maybe that's something that we need to kind of digest and bring back to this group, or if they're kind of specific ideas, but all well taken, and certainly things that we can kind of think through on our end too of how we can advance through the agency.
Thanks.
Thank you. Momentarily, we'll turn our attention to the fall workshop. Abby, you have your hand up before we do that.
Thank you, Joy, and thank you, Barbara, for your comments too. And just, before we leave this topic, other things that can be done to diversify the conversation on water in Colorado, I wanted to mention, kind of, it's more from my professional life, but also from a collaborative standpoint, that we've begun to do some research into other organizations that could be applicants. Barbara had mentioned about the ability for funding through water plan implementation grants, or maybe through basin grants. And there's a lot of possibility we feel that could open up that applicant field, but maybe there's a lack of confidence in the process. Maybe there's a lack of awareness of the process and the funding abilities out there. And so myself and some partners, we have been looking into the ability of how could established successful organizations potentially partner with newer organizations, more diversity within these organizations to apply for these fundings, to be able to pursue environmental projects, maybe recreational projects, or at least truly multi-benefit projects. How could we mentor new organizations to be confident and successful in the application funding process? I find that there's sometimes a barrier to kind of jump in the funding pool and the grant application pool for a variety of reasons. And so how could a mentorship, or how could there be more assistance to help diversify that funding applicant pool in the future? So there's some efforts underway, but just thought that was a really great way that we could all collectively increase access to the funding for water plan projects and ideas and innovative ideas for water plan implementation going forward.
It's cool to hear that that's happening, Abby, and it makes me think that again, like one of the possibilities for a continued conversation is, what are you all up to already related to any of these themes that we've been talking about, and how can you get involved with and support each other's work? So it is time to pivot to talking about the fall workshop, and I will hand things back to Russ.
Thanks so much, and apologize for my changing scenery. I'm actually down in Durango. We had a roundtable meeting for the Southwest Roundtable, so it was really nice to get to see several people more in person. I actually got to even meet with Abby the other day, so it's been nice to start to see people, and I look forward to hopefully getting to see all of you at some point. Maybe the next opportunity is really going to be the upcoming workshop if we can't find something sooner. So maybe next slide, Kat, if you don't mind. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the workshop, and I think we've kind of, really always known in our commitment to you all, how we phrased this from the very beginning when we talked about the task force and you agreed to be on it, was to really be cognizant of your time as well and recognize that maybe some of you had very busy lives and couldn't commit a ton of time, but were very eager to help us think through this. And so I want to be really clear in all that we're doing. This is not about a one and done or a check the box. This is kind of, as Kat alluded to, we don't really have much, if anything, mentioned around equity or inclusivity in the water plan. And it's so clear that, inclusivity makes us stronger. It builds resilience in the state, and we need to embrace that. And what we heard a lot, I think, through our discussions and through the one-on-one chats that we had with each of you, was a real desire to talk about history as well. So we're kind of recognizing that as much as we want to have this kind of workshop that maybe fits that mold of really our time commitment with you, that we probably are going to need a little bit of a longer, a day-long conference that has this workshop component embedded in it, to kind of talk about some of the things that you've told us are really important. So maybe if you click on the next slide, I'll talk through kind of maybe a morning and afternoon piece of how we're thinking about this kind of conference piece and where the workshop kind of folds in. But I would really love to have and think of a keynote speaker that, and we're happy to do the legwork on this. And, I don't think we ever put it on you that you have to become event planners, but to find a keynote speaker that would really help us highlight this theme of resilience and inclusivity seems to me to set the stage for the discussion that needs to be had. It seems to me to honor the history of the roundtables and how we all came together really with the roots in deep drought and fire in the state of Colorado that highlighted the need and highlighted our future water challenges and the need for collaboration around those. And it's the same story that we're seeing play out this year and last year, now with even new challenges added on top of that, not least of which to include the COVID pandemic. So I think that we really, need to set that tone. I think we need to set the stage. You've heard Joy mention this a few times, but to be honest, not in a way that limits any of the discussion by any means, but I do think we need to maybe set the stage of the space of what CWCB can do as one smaller agency within a sea of this state, and where there are opportunities. And I really like that comment that came out, and I think that has been hit on here too, of where you all and others across the state can help us move these things forward. I think if the water plan does anything, it shines a light on the challenges that we had and the opportunities. And this opportunity to really embrace inclusivity, I think, is one that is so poignant and something that we're going to have to focus on, and that you're helping us think through. So the thought that we've gone through is that maybe what we need to have is a little bit of a kind of maybe 15-minute presentation on history, followed by a panel. And as I see it, some of the most compelling stories that we haven't really gotten to highlight and that we've heard from you that are so important are probably around some of the tribal concerns. And I only got to see Kathy on video last night and today, but I'm thinking about her. I'm thinking about Ernest. I had a really great conversation with Mike Preston down in the Southwest too. I did not know, but worked a lot with Ernest House's father on setting some of the kind of irrigation work and the kind of just thinking about negotiations on tribal issues. And I really think it's important to highlight those stories and maybe have a panel that's built around talking about some of these issues to give voice to them. I think, maybe a historical context setting, and I think we talked about it here today, but the Republican River, or, issues issues like the Ark Valley conduit, things that really kind of touch on both compact issues, but water quality and just water shortages and the kind of cascading effects of an entire economy potentially falling apart. In Arkansas, we think about the Crowley County example, for example, or as a big example of what happens when ag goes away and what that does to the livelihood of any individual community, let alone the impacts to tax base or the state or the broader region. So we are, I'm thinking there's something there, and to touch on this kind of concept that we've hit on a lot through this of the rural-urban divide. And then I think, maybe some of we've heard a lot, and we've added that seat for acequias. I think there's something there. We hear a lot about that from several parts of the state of interest in understanding that story more, but maybe to use that as a place to just have a larger conversation around BIPOC issues and maybe have a panel built around there. So none of this is baked or set in stone, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor of how we're kind of thinking of a conference that might frame up a deeper dive into the workshop. It just seems so clear to me, and almost inherently I knew the challenge would be that given our little bit of time that we have, that we're not going to really be able to, as on this task force, dive into the history. And yet so many of you have told us how important that is to tell that story. And these stories, and I heard that kind of echoed, and I think it was some of the comments from Sonia and others, that this kind of Melly, this education, bringing these stories to light. Why does this matter to me? And why does that matter to us? I've been thinking about that a lot as we've had these really, quite honestly, painful for people conversations around drought in the state and what that means to their livelihood. And that's, maybe on a broad level, the Western Slope or, the ag community. But I think we all inherently know that there are also disproportionately impacted communities that maybe have a story to tell that we have a role to help highlight as well. And that's an area where I think you can help us. So that's how we're kind of thinking about the morning, and maybe that tees up, next slide, the afternoon. And in the afternoon, my thought is that maybe there's a role, and in all of this, I guess I want to make clear too, that where I see this conference, and again, being cognizant of your time, is not to say you have to attend all of it. I certainly would more than welcome all of you to attend and would love it, but I recognize that you might not be able to, and a few of you have told us that the date may not work at all, but to at least give you an idea of a window of time that we'd really love it. If you can only participate at one piece, this would be the time. That would be this kind of afternoon workshop. The other thing I'm hoping to achieve at the workshop, and what I think we kind of laid out at the beginning, is just a recognition that there are many other voices across the state. And if we're going to, talk the talk, we probably should walk the walk and open up this opportunity to bring others in. We've had a lot of input on really just having my voice heard, and why is the task force limited? And the point was never to have a task force that would be limiting. It was to highlight these issues and have some folks that could help us think through what those challenges were from their unique perspectives. But I think this conference can really serve, and I'm seeing Melly ask, what's the purpose of the conference? Is to really walk the talk of saying, we do want to invite others into this. We do want to say that this is important to share for those who haven't been able to listen into these, or maybe haven't been tracking but are interested, to kind of make a very intentional pivot to say, we want to invite people to come, to share their stories, to provide public comment, to engage with task force members in a workshop type exercise. So I think that, and then what we heard from you is so important, is the context of the storytelling of the history of some of these bigger issues across the state that maybe frame up why these challenges are so great and why it's so important for us to collaborate, is really a big goal of this workshop. And of course, this is kind of serving as meeting number 3 for you. So I had a concept that maybe we would do even some, I've heard them called Ignite style presentations or Pechacucha style presentations, but short, 5-minute vignettes that might allow some people to share some unique stories and perspectives. There's a few people that have reached out to us across the state that have some pretty compelling stories and maybe weren't, would have liked to have been on the task force officially, or certainly want to play a role. I think we want to open up some opportunity for that. I think we want to share, kind of similar to what Kat walked through, but again, before we dive into the workshop, a bit of framing of how is this input going to inform the water plan, and really making sure that we are clear about, again, what we can do, where our limitations might lie, but where we can highlight the challenges and the opportunities and how we potentially can work to build actions around those. I'm reading in the chat now. The outcomes that we would want to achieve, I think, are really this. I think each of you may wear this weight. I know I do. We're doing this over the course of a handful of meetings. We've got 4 meetings for this task force. That's not a lot of time. We've got 4 2-hour meetings to try to think that we're going to solve or even be able to dive too deeply into what is a pretty enormous challenge. I think is not the right approach. But the way that I think that we've all kind of shared this is we're going to take a stab at saying, what are the important areas that we need to shine a light on? And how do we start to think about framing those up in a way that can be easily digested by others that we can roll out and say, is this right? Same kind of questions that we're asking you here today. Here's what we've kind of heard from you. Is this right? And I think we can now take that to a broader group and say, here's what we've kind of heard and been thinking about. Is this right? Are we missing something? Is something off base? Are you thinking of something else? And really make this be a very public sharing of that. That we can ultimately then take all that input that we've heard and kind of have the task force help us filter that and say, okay, did all the collective input we hear kind of filter into these main themes? Do we need to broaden this out and really make this much more of a public engagement exercise than it might feel if it was only the task force alone thinking through this? So I've seen Kathy as also asking who's the workshop audience. I think this is getting at that question of who are we sharing this with and how can we get this out there? We're doing an all-day workshop. That probably doesn't work for everybody's schedule, but I think recording this, putting it online, making sure that we have access to it, and then we've got some ideas too of how you can help us follow up at a community level. But this is really a first step, I would say, of very publicly trying to engage a broader audience around water. So it's everyone, which is pretty weighty, but it's really thinking about if we do this as a hybrid event. Not everybody has to drive. There's probably still challenges to getting access, but maybe we can think about if we are recording, and I'm certainly open to ideas of how we can share this in other venues as well. I heard Barbara say, can we break it up into 2 days? I'm reading the chat still, sorry, there's a few questions coming in. So it will be virtual and in person. So right now, we have worked and we need to kind of get official approval on the location, but we've worked to identify a spot in Denver. It would hold probably 200, but because we're a little uncertain about COVID and Delta variant, we'll have to think about if we limit access in the way that other, like in-person attendance, in the way that other groups like Water Congress are doing. They're kind of doing a limited number so that I think they can build in some social distancing. So that's on our mind, but we're also trying to encourage the most participation. So definitely keeping it hybrid so that everything we do will be Zoom and a mix of in-person is what we're thinking about. We could do it over 2 days, but I'm not sure. It's a lot to plan one big event. It's even more to plan 2. If we're doing an event, we have to have food and parking and all that. So just to keep, since we don't have a carved out identified budget for this effort, I think that this can be a one-day event, but again, looking to, and we'll talk about this in a minute, I think Elizabeth has a slide, how we can engage you and utilize things like Engage CWCB to continue to get feedback even after that event.
So Russ, and just wanting to make sure that we answered Barbara's question. Barbara did have her hand up. Did your hand come down, Barbara? Did that answer your question?
It did. It's just along the lines of who is the audience. It seems to me if we're trying to engage in real time individuals who work during the day, it would certainly be helpful if the time was set such that at least part of the workshop is after regular daytime working hours. I understand the difficulty in trying to do hybrid and having a location and people driving to Denver, but along the lines of earlier comments in this meeting, it seems like that's part of walking the talk.
Good comment, Barbara. And I think we have some ideas and we'd actually like your help in doing that. I don't think it has to all hinge on this workshop because certainly some of it is, our traditional stakeholder groups too, like roundtables and others who I think will be able to attend, but no matter when we said it or where we said it, someone won't be able to come. So we need to expand the opportunity beyond whatever day and time we set. And so we want to, and I'll let Elizabeth talk to this in a second, but really work with you, and in your case, you and Lynette, to identify a community event in the North Platte where you think we could really do it at a time and venue that works best for your community, and come to you, because I think that's the other thing, right? To meet people where they're at.
Hey, Russ, can we take a couple more questions? We do have a couple more hands, Melly and Ernest, before we move on to the next piece. Melly, you had your hand up first, and then Ernest.
Well, Ernest has not had a chance to speak, so maybe I'll let him go first.
Thanks, okay. Melly. I appreciate that. No, this is a great conversation. I've been following along to the previous comments. I agree with a lot of what everyone has already said. I think, Russ, I appreciate the overview of the public workshop and you being down in Durango. And I don't know if folks saw the Colorado Sun article earlier this week about the Ute Mountain Tribe Farm and Ranch and the water shortage there and the impact. I sit on that oversight board with Mike Preston. It's been a moving target every day and trying to figure out how to retain not only hay and agricultural needs moving forward, not just us, but other farmers and ranchers in the Southwest area, native and non. I think a panel, I'd be happy to help with any panel there. I think also that, and I believe it was, I think it was somebody else who spoke to the representative for Southern Ute, also representative about what's happening in 10 tribes water group out of the Colorado basin. I know there's this conversation both locally, statewide, and then regionally with what's going on in Lake Powell and the Colorado River Basin. And I still think there's missing a mark of what the tribal engagement involvement in that. And I think an invitation to tribal leaders to hear from them directly about what their approach is, like Ute Mountain around trying to figure out what to do with Lake Nighthorse, and Ute Water Rights Settlement up at Animas Plata is just one component of that. But anyways, I've just been thinking and so happy to be more of a thought partner in there, and let me know however you need, whatever you need from me, and however we can help raise that awareness. And again, thank you for the opportunity. That's it.
Thank you, Ernest. I will take you up on that. You have been on my mind, and I would love to engage with you on that. So maybe we can take that offline after this, but I would love to catch some time with you. And if you happen to be near where I'm at now, maybe we can make something happen today.
Unfortunately, I just spent about the last 2 weeks over 2,000 miles on the Western Slope, and I got home late last night. So
we'll pass
all about Wolf introduction. So nothing to do with water, but I can give you a call. So then thank you. We'll connect.
Sounds good. Thanks, sir.
Okay, and then Melly has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. There is just so much to talk about around water. It just seems a little daunting. I'm still very confused about what this workshop is about. Are we trying to get people in there to give us input on how we diversify? Are we trying to bring in a diversified audience? What exactly are we trying to accomplish here? I'm still not very clear. I can tell you one thing I don't want to see is a full day of presentation after presentation after presentation. I don't know the idea of panels is a little more dynamic if it is people sharing their own experiences. There are a couple of things that I think would be, in my mind, useful to get just very, very wide input on. Again, my main question is, I'm very strategic about how I go about trying to solve issues, and I still don't understand why people don't participate. Have there been any surveys done out there? Because we can get a whole bunch of people in a workshop that participate in water workshops all the time, and they can tell us over and over again what their theories are, but I want to hear from people that don't participate. Why is it that you don't participate? Why is it? What are the problems? Because there's a potential long list of issues. And if we attack the wrong one, we're wasting money in some ways and resources and time. So I think that, first of all, in order to be able to have a workshop to maybe include information, maybe we start out by saying, hey, this is what's out there. And I made this point before, and I just gonna reiterate that I think it's very important to have some data that we can, instead of hunches, that we can base our information on. And I don't know exactly how you do that between now and September. Maybe you can't. The other thing that I think would be really useful is to say, we're not going to resolve this in this workshop. We're not going to resolve this in the lifetime of this task force, but what are our recommendations? What are the tools that we can add to the water plant, for example, to bring more people in? And a whole bunch of ideas were thrown in. What can we do outside of the water plant? So, those are things that are going through my head that would be helpful, but without having that basic framework of what the workshop is intending to accomplish, I'm still a little bit lost.
Melanie, I think that's all great feedback. And on a very broad brush, I would say that there's, I'm sure, many, many more people across the state, but a good 50 people who reached out to us directly and said, I want to be a part of this discussion. And I think we owe it to them to make room for them to be part of it. And some have very strong feelings, some have very broad brush things, some have very specific things. And I think we need to give voice and make sure, and I think that was my response back to them, is a commitment for them not to feel marginalized and to have an opportunity to really intentionally weigh into this. And I think what others have identified in some of the comments you're making is this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so much to do. There's endless roads that we could go down. So I think what I would hope that we can do in that kind of workshop component of this and that afternoon thing is we'll allow some time for public comment if people have a specific thing that they want to say. I think that you're right. I don't want this just to be a series of, leading up to that workshop piece of presentations. I'm really hoping it is people sharing their stories, their concerns, and ideally, to your point, the opportunity. What are the things that we can, and then CWCB can, think about as we're doing the water plan that puts a marker in there of future work that could be done that advances things, or future practices or processes. So that's very much on my mind. But I do hope that we, at a minimum, make that loop or close that loop with the folks that felt that either they didn't agree with this process and they want to understand it more and invite them in, or the people that said, I really want to be a part of this process and I've got some specific ideas and maybe don't feel heard right now. And then that third piece, and I think this is, a slow burn of the thing that we try to grow. And this is the first step, not the last by any means, of trying to be intentional about is how do we do more? And I think you're right to point out, maybe there's some data that helps us. I think some of you have brought up some things. I heard Victoria talk about, maybe we have to think about paying people if that's something. And I don't know, there's some difficulties there, but that's an idea. Or there are other ways that we can grow our networks. I think that's, there's some pieces of this that are going to be low hanging fruit, that are going to be first steps that maybe are things that we can easily advance. And there's going to be things in here that are tough and we need to hear it all. So this is a first stab at trying to get that broad brush of, and help with your help, decipher from that, what are the things that we can move forward on?
Yeah, thanks, Ross. If I may, just one quick follow-up question. The 50 people that have contacted you, are they the usual members of the water community? Because there's a lot of confusion about what this task force is supposed to do. There's people think it's a demand management kind of thing, and they get really defensive. Are those people that are contacting you, said 50 people, are you seeing new faces, or are you seeing the usual players of the water community that we're going to be talking to? And which I don't think is a bad idea. I just want to know, what is it for? And if it's for to make sure that those people in the water community have additional input, that's fine. Then that kind of takes us in a completely different direction than if the workshop is to try to attract people that are outside of the water community and understand what their perspective is and what we can do about it. Those are two very different conferences, two very different purposes.
I think that's right.
It's not as quick as I thought. I'm sorry about that.
No, don't be at all. These are great thoughts. And I always appreciate your opinion on this stuff or anything. Honestly, you're just such a great thought leader. But you're right. I think they are two different things. And the folks that have reached out to me, there may be some new faces in there of new to their role, but maybe, are new to an NGO, but they're a mix of folks from the NGO community, the agricultural community, the roundtables, that I think just want, maybe greater access. We've tried to do that. We're, live streaming this now and make it public. Certainly we've had interest from the legislature and others who just want insight, even our own board members who may be listening in now too. And so just being intentional about making that space so people can actually be heard, right? They've told me something, and I think the comments really do. I've heard some really unique perspective about, a very specific concept, like how can we build more equity into water conservation, which is an interesting concept that would be neat to kind of hear more about. All the way to the other side of the coin of what you're saying is, is this equity discussion going to harm me or is it taking away from me? And I think all of those, to give some voice to all of those and create a space where we can hear it all and kind of help explain where we're at and maybe just be honest about what we don't know. I think that was a big theme of this is we really don't know what we're going to be able to do in this space, but the starting point is here. Like this, we have to open up the space to hear the ideas so that we can filter it and I think really build upon it. And that's what I think that you are helping us with. And by kind of just starting to at least broaden the opportunity and let people know that this is a topic of concern. We're starting to grow the tent. And to your point, growing the tent and getting those other folks in that, maybe don't feel like they're going to be heard, so they've opted out or never felt included, or, we need to meet them where they're at in a different way through, a translator or, at a time of day that works better for them. Those are the maybe next tier level of work that we get down to. And I'm hoping, again, just like that challenge I'll throw out is, what could we do in the Southwest as a first step towards that at a time or place that would work great for the people of Cortez or Durango or wherever makes the most sense. I would be very open to that. Or Ernest, you may have some ideas too of, how is there a intentional opportunity that we could make to really sit down and coordinate with the tribal community better.
Yeah, and Rustin, I think that these are some really good questions and comments. Again, you're helping us build and shape this workshop again to make it meaningful to everybody involved. So I really appreciate that. And I know one of the other things that Barbara had mentioned is, especially with this divided day, if there's a place to accept public comments as far as the first part of the morning and the afternoon, and where do we use Engage CWCB to be a part of that receptacle for gathering public comments and public input during the September public workshop. So I think those are all things that we need to continue thinking through what this workshop looks like, building those objectives and the audiences, as all of you have mentioned. And I know that there were some additional thoughts that Russ and Elizabeth had for even your involvement. You're already doing many things, and you're really a catalyst in this process. And so there are some partnerships and some other things that we would continue to look to you to provide as we either build going into the workshop piece, but also beyond the workshop completion of the Colorado Water Plan, and then the conversations that continue after the Colorado Water Plan. So I know there are some key roles that we would love to continue to see you do. So I know Russ and Elizabeth had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Gigi. And maybe, so I guess to kind of frame this up, that if you can attend the entire day, I would be more than grateful. And I think it would be amazing to have you there. If you can only attend one piece of this, at least that 1:30 to 3:30 workshop time would be the optimal. And it may still not work for everyone, but I'm hoping that during that kind of the workshop piece, that we could really engage you. And maybe I'll turn things over to Elizabeth now, but Elizabeth Scoder is new hire on our team to really help us think through community outreach, including equity and education kind of components of this. And I heard that education piece being so strong, and I do see the interconnection, whether that's highlighting the stories or thinking about how we broaden how we're doing education and outreach across the state. But I know that one ask we have for this workshop is it would be great if, one or two task force members could be in the breakout exercises so that you're helping guide the conversation at your table, or if you're attending virtually, in your room. And we can do both. We can have breakout tables in person, and we can have breakout tables in rooms on Zoom. So Elizabeth, I will turn things over to you if you're on.
Thanks, Russ. I just wanted to say hello to everybody. I'm so excited to join this group, and I've just been really blown away by how thoughtful everyone is in this group. So I'm really looking forward to continuing the work with you all. So Kat, do you mind, going to the next slide? So I just wanted to summarize, I guess, a little bit about what Russ started and what we're asking the task force moving forward. So I'll start out with asking for partnership in the workshop. And like Russ mentioned, it's going to be hybrid. And we would love to have some members either help facilitate some of these panels and take leadership in some of the breakout sessions in the workshop aspect of it. But just to echo what we've really heard in the comments from you all earlier in this meeting is just expanding our reach. And that's something that I'm going to be really working with each of you, is to expand the network and who we're actually bringing this information to. So any ways that you can help us expand our networks, make new connections, and bring more people into this workshop, either in person or virtually, would be greatly appreciated. And then the last thing I'll just mention is, and I think this is a great way to kind of go off of what I've heard, at least a bunch in the comments so far, is just meeting people where they're at in a time and a location that feels safe and accessible, and is cognizant of all the other things that are going on in their life. So something that I'd love to do is just organize some smaller meetings in each of your communities and really ask you to be a liaison into organizing those events at a location and a time of day that really works for the community that we're trying to reach. And ideally, it would be a small community meeting in each of the basin, and it could be at a coffee shop or a library or a community center, really anywhere where the community feels comfortable coming to and is accessible to them. And I think the thinking behind this is just echoing another thing I heard, is that it's really hard to give meaningful feedback when you don't understand what you're being asked to give input or feedback on. So that's what we're trying to address in these smaller meetings within each of the basins. And I will be reaching out to each of you to help set up that process. But thank you. And if anyone has any questions on how that will work, I think the structure is still kind of in flux, and it will be really based off of the needs of the community. There's really no size that's too small, but we really want to make sure, like Russ said, we're meeting people where they're at and kind of opening up those networks. And I really look forward to working with each of you moving forward.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, so just to help with that thought. If you have an idea, maybe you have an idea off the bat. I could see Alina, maybe your wheels are spinning of something you could do at the college, and that would be great. Or and it could be a big thing, or it could be a small thing. We don't necessarily have a ton of budget to put behind this, but we're hoping that if we can utilize rooms that are available, or libraries, or if it's we're hanging out at wherever is a good community spot, and then just people are rotating through, and we're really open to anything. We wanted to really kind of make this feel personal to you, of what you saw working well, and our hope would be that the two of you that are kind of in each basin could kind of collaborate to help think through that. So Melly, that might be you and Lee talking together. But if there's, just a really big need and we can squeeze in an extra meeting, and there's two things we need to do, you let us know. We're going to be as flexible as we can with this, but this is a way that we're really seeing to kind of take what Melly said. There's two conversations maybe, right? There's the people that we're talking to that are really engaged on water, maybe already know the things that they at least think that feel like they need to know, and know where they can engage. And maybe we're giving some voice at the workshop and the conference that we're going to have. And maybe that helps kind of, in some ways, offer a bit of an educational opportunity too, as we're sharing these stories and that history. But then I think there is this piece of maybe the deeper work of going to a community that says, I've never heard about the water plant. Like, tell me about that and tell me why it's important for me, right? And maybe that's a place too where we could do some polling or get some extra data of why people do or don't engage, or what, if after hearing that, if it's, valuable to them, or what would make it valuable to them. I think that's the kind of feedback that we're open to, and really would love your input on this thought and what you're thinking you might do in your communities.
Hey, Russ.
Yep.
This is Sonia. I was just thinking, as we were having this conversation, that we're really missing our youth. Like, it'd be great to have a youth ambassador from each basin, either helping to get them to this workshop, helping to give our youth a voice, because then they can go back to their schools or wherever they are and help to share the message, or, get a water group going, or a conservation group going. They have plastic recycling groups that kids do in the high schools and stuff, but what about water? So I was just, looking at the series of people on this call and our little frames, I was like, we don't have anyone from our younger generation here.
Great point, Sonia. Yeah, so we're continuing to kind of put meat on the bones for the workshop and the conference. All of these additional ideas, and I know we're moving to the next slide, but wrapping things up, because we know that everyone's busy and has to get back to their commitments. But we do ask you to kind of continue to contribute to this effort. And we haven't heard from everybody. Remember, this is also your task force, and so if there are a few of you who didn't have a chance to respond or to provide some input or some thoughts, please do so now. We've got a few minutes, but I want to make sure that we have a chance to hear from everyone before we move forward. But yeah, we'll keep working on the workshop, keep getting us your input, getting us your thoughts. And what other thoughts are out there from those of you we haven't heard from? If you have thoughts, I know you do.
I know Alina had made some comments in the chat, but I know I don't think we've heard her voice, or Andrea's, or Fatima's. So if you have something you want to add now, I certainly want to make space for that.
My mind has just been really going. And again, I mentioned in the chat that really, I think that one of the really important things is to set the atmosphere for, the conference or discussions, because the last thing that is really going to be productive is everybody just kind of staking claims and not working together to be collaborative on this. And it really is something that is hard to get over, because we do live in a culture where the historical myth is about individualism. and the success of you work toward the success of one group and that's it. And so it is about kind of shifting that mindset to understand that everybody's well-being is tied up in all of this. The other thing that I was thinking too, in terms of getting youth voices in with the film series, is also, a kind of maybe TikTok competition where the students themselves are invited to do short videos of maybe the importance of water in their community. And the kids are TikToking all the time. I mean, I don't understand it, but they do. And I'm just thinking that that would be a viral way to kind of get things moving. So those are just my thoughts.
Great idea. Alina, I want to see you TikToking.
No idea.
Good idea, though. Thank you so much. Thanks for adding to that conversation. Anyone else? All right. Well, seeing no additional comments, again, we're always open to receive comments as we craft this workshop. So please make sure you're reaching out to Russ or Kat or any one of Russ's team, me, to make sure that we hear the thoughts and really make this workshop meaningful. And that's really where all of you are going, is let's make it meaningful to everybody involved. That really has been the big question of the day, is how do we make it meaningful by starting with efforts like this. So
this is Rio. Would it be possible to maybe get an early kind of outline of the workshop as you guys pull that together, so we could have direct input to that too, not just when it's finalized, or put ideas out, but just maybe to be respond to a preliminary agenda or something like that?
Sure. Well, and we can share these slides. You'll have those. We can also, I think we're going to have to move forward on getting kind of panelists really quickly, but maybe what I can do, Rio, is just follow up with you one-on-one, or anybody else that wants to kind of have that level of insight. We're thought the task force is really going to be focused on the workshop component versus the entire conference is probably more CWCB led, mostly just because of timing and recognizing that not everybody here wants to take the time to plan an entire day event. But if you are interested, I will just reach out to you one-on-one, and anyone else that would like that, I'm happy to circle back with any of you. Certainly, I heard that from Ernest, and I will be reaching out to him next week as well.
Great, thank you.
I see Barbara in the chat as well, so I'll talk with her.
All right, so with that, we're 3 minutes before time. It sounds like anyone who had any additional thoughts or final thoughts have expressed them. We always want to thank you for your time, your energy, your thoughtfulness, just being here, being a part, helping CWCB, helping us answer the questions that are most prevalent in your mind, most prevalent in the community's mind. We got a lot of work to do, and that we'll continue to do. So we appreciate the deep dive, the sweat equity that everybody is putting into all of this. So with that, we will say thank you, and we look forward to continuing to hear from you, any questions that might come up, as well as we're looking forward to your participation in the conference/workshop.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care. Have a great week.
Thank you.